This is the culture.
Hello and welcome back to the Cinema Wave podcast. I'm your host today, Vinny Albano, and I am joined by my co-host Zach Miller.
How we doing, man? How we doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing? It's been a minute.
Good.
It's been a minute.
It's been a long time. Podcast we did was Napoleon, and that was ages ago. But for this review, I don't think we'll have the same result. You know, I think it's gonna be a good talk. But this is a great show to talk about.
Yeah, we are talking about Shogun today, the new epic on FX, and it's also on Hulu. I know there's like a partnership there. It is based off the famous book by James Clevin, who I believe that's how I'm pronouncing his name correctly, or Clavel. I could be wrong on that. Anyhow, it is a award-winning book, and it's an epic that was also adapted in the 80s with Richard Chamberlain and Toshiro Mifune, he's a legend. He's in almost like every single one of the Kurosawa films. But they're readapting this with Hiroyuki Sanada and as well as Cosmo Jarvis. And it's off to an epic start. I don't know if you'd agree, but maybe we could go over some what we think of the first two episodes, just a brief overview.
Yes. Yeah. I'd also like to add too that we're gonna try and cover these bi-weekly. So every 2 episodes we'll come back and do a review for you guys. And the players involved with this too. I really like Hiroyuki. He's a great actor that's been around for a while, and I think he's finally getting more of a spotlight and a role to shine in with. This role is Toranaga, who's our protagonist samurai. And I really like. I knew nothing about this story, so I really liked the introduction of there's a rivalry between the clans of the samurai. If people are confused at all, long story short, the Taiko, basically the leader of Japan at this point, early in their history, just passed away. And he passed on power to the 5 tribal leaders. And Toranaga is one of those leaders that is having a rivalry with the other 4, and they don't like his heritage being related to the Shogun ultimate power. So they're kind of like feuding with him, afraid that he's going to take over, but he's reluctant to do so. So he's just protecting the Taiko's heir until he is of age to come into that role. And in the first episode, we definitely see the struggle that he's going through with that, and then we see the Englishman, John Blackthorne, the navigator of the ship. Their ship crash lands in Japan. They finally discover Japan. They've been looking for it as the Portuguese have been hiding the island from them. So I really like the early civilization period too. I think there's something really interesting about that because it's kind of like the Wild West where there were no rules and limitations on what men and women would do at that point. Like people act like just super brutal in their ways. So when you also see like colonials coming to a foreign land, and now Japan too, that's just a relationship we haven't really seen much in film and television. So I really liked seeing early Englishmen, early Portuguese come to Japan and kind of riff with that culture. But what did you think so far of like episode 1 at least?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm a big fan of just Japanese feudal Japan history. I always found it very fascinating. So I love seeing this on screen. I think that just from episode 1 alone, we see that they're already putting in so much production value, which is so appreciated. The costuming and just the overall scale of everything for being a miniseries is it's beautiful. It's beautiful to look at. It's beautiful to hear. Music by Atticus Ross. I believe there's some other composing collaborators as well. But I speaking of the story and the setting more as well, I just love that tension between the Council of Regents. Like you mentioned, the Taiko died early due to illness, and his son, his rightful heir, is not old enough, so he passed it on to a council of regents rather than one regent. And there's some plays into that too. That was revealed in episode 2, which I guess we could talk about later on. But that seeing that tension and kind of like pointing fingers, like, hey, he has the potential to overpower us, Toranaga. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's something that I really just enjoy. I find like that medieval feudal political thrill. We talked about it on the Dune review of how like Dune very much has that same feeling of just like these rivaling households, and I just love it. It like hits this like piece in me that it I don't know. I used to be really obsessed with like I said, feudal history when I was younger. So it like invokes that, and I think they just play it out here excellently well. Like all the actors are doing an incredible job here, and the filmmakers as well bring such a serious light to the matter. It's just very dramatic and has a lot of weight to it, which I appreciate.
I think a lot of it too, because I feel the same way. I really like those historical and even fictitious feudal relationships, and then the houses of armies that go against each other. I think a lot of that ripples from Game of Thrones too. Like this was very Game of Thrones-esque in a real world situation of just who's making political plays and power plays behind other people's backs. And Game of Thrones was such a big role player for that. Was just like every turn in Game of Thrones was somebody's backstabbing the other, and we're not going to see it coming, and then that's going to have an effect on the next couple seasons or the next big characters, So I feel a lot of that coming into play already through 2 episodes, and I like how they are using the Englishman to their advantage and to just defeat the other Japanese clan and that way. So I really like to see what lengths these men and women will go to defeat the other. And even if it means risking their Japanese kingdom, like they are that power hungry. So I really liked everything that they went to. They also did a great job at portraying the brutality of this time. Like, 1600s, 1700s, there's a lot of crazy things that happen to people, beheadings, like the one Englishman gets boiled in a pot. They decide to do in episode 1.
And he gets boiled slowly.
Yes, for days.
To the point where he just bashes his head in.
Yeah. He literally had to take himself out. And they, the one, I think is his cousin. Is it Toranaga's cousin or the one right hand man? I can't remember. He has a beard. I can't remember his character's name.
The gray haired one, or the one that committed the boiling, which is Yabushige.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. He was pretty like cold blooded.
Yeah.
And he takes out people pretty swiftly, but he said he wanted to do that his way and send a message really to the Englishman. But I also really like the involvement of the Portuguese and the fact that the Portuguese are gatekeeping the information from the Japanese.
Oh yeah.
And they are, they're trying to like get rid of this Englishman as swift as they can, because they know once he releases information, like a whole can of worms is going to get opened up, and he's going to basically bring their own war to Japanese shores, and they don't want any part of that. So I really like the manipulation there. John is trying to use Toranaga also for that rife with the Portuguese, and he's like, look, like they've been doing stuff, and you don't know them like I know them, that kind of thing. But yeah, in episode 1, there's a lot of events that happen. It's a lot of like good setup. I really like the production value of episode 1. Like you were saying, like they just do a great job at immersing us in the world and the time period, as well as the environment and the filmmaking. Like for an FX show too, this is like really, really high budget, and I was super impressed with that. But yeah, anything else you have to add about episode 1 too?
Yeah, I want to comment specifically about Yabushige because he's already like he's a conniving character and he's not really a good guy, but this moral gray line that they're forming with his character reminds me a lot of Littlefinger. And I think he's already become one of my favorite characters, although more explosively and more outwardly explicit than a character like Littlefinger. He has these moments of like, he has some ulterior motives, you know, like for example, when John Blackthorne comes ashore with his English crew, he takes the ship, he takes the vessel captive, locks up all the men, like you said, boils one of the men alive, but then is also saying to one of his men that don't tell Toranaga about this. We're gonna keep the guns. We're gonna keep all the items because you know the Council of Regents. They're at tension. So if a war goes down, they're gonna want to hire someone with items like that, with artillery like that. So they're gonna want to go to him. But then we find out that he says, then obviously Toranaga's men come over and is like, hey, we heard you got this English vessel. So and then he says that there's a spy that let
from Toranaga.
Yeah. So but we see in episode 2 and later on that he's still working under Toranaga. So and I apologize if I'm kind of all over the place. I'm trying to like format my words, but I just like how they're setting him out to be. He's openly in the open conniving against Toranaga, has these like ulterior motives of his own. He's very much putting himself first, but he has to still be a servant under his lord. So when they do show up to his shore and they're like, hey, we heard you got the vessel. And he's like, yeah, I do. Take it. And you can see that the actor, Tadanobu Asano, he does such a good job just expressing. And he says so many great moments throughout these first 2 episodes where on his face alone, you could tell like, it's like, fuck, like they found me out. And you just see his face change and he puts on a very plastic smile, like anything for Lord Toranaga. Yeah, take all the guns, take everything, take all the men. So, but I wanted to just point out his character because I thought his performance and what they're building up with his character is really unique. I'm curious if something's going to happen later on. You know, he's not reliable as of right now. Right. So later on, when this tension between the Council of Regents kind of explodes, he might have a big part, and he might openly like be like, Toranaga, I'm not on your side anymore, you know, and hop onto the other guys' side. So we'll see, but I think one of my favorite characters thus far. I don't know if you had any.
No, I was going to also say, too, there's another great scene with him, and that's when he's on the cliff, too.
Oh, yes.
And Blackthorne kind of, like, coaxes him into, like, oh, no, I'll go get him. I'll try and save his life. And you don't know if he's, like, being sincere about that, but he's obviously the first one to go forward. And then Yabushige is kind of like, no, I can't let you do that in front of my men because that'll be dishonorable and like, it'll embarrass me, too. So he decides to go do it, and then he just like wipes out and almost kills himself too. So that was, you can see like that was just another example of he is very self-serving. So to your point of like Littlefinger was always out for himself, and he will whisper anything in someone's ear just to get by and get ahead, and he's always in it for who is the person that I can help out and always come out on top. Like it's like that always sunny line. I can't lose if I always play both sides. I'll always come out on top. Yeah, so it's like
exactly.
You know, if he plays both sides, he is gonna come out on top. But I think at a point, especially if Toranaga is keeping an eye on him, like after he caught the vessel, and in episode 2, we'll get to that too. But Toranaga is keeping a very watchful eye.
Oh yeah.
So at some point, he's only going to put up with that so long. And if he finds out that he does something like real treacherous and gets one of his people killed, it could be pretty bad. So I mean, you know, I think he might not make it to the end of the show, honestly, because of his treachery. You know, you usually see people like that get the axe by the end of the show.
Yeah.
But
which is understandable.
Yeah. And I really like his character too, though. And but moving into the other big part of episode 1, there's a very established rivalry between Toranaga and Ishido, who is kind of like taking the lead role of the council and trying to push out Toranaga pretty largely. So and by the end of episode 1, we find out that Toranaga is being kept in captive. You know, I can't escape here. If I do, or if I try to kill them now, there's no way we can win. So we have to use this guy Blackthorne and any connections that he has to defeat Ishido and restore some order here. So I really liked the setup of that as like a cliffhanger to episode 1. But what were you thinking about Ishido too?
Yeah, I think who is the actor that plays him? Because he is menacing, and I'm really excited to see more of him because on the Council of Regions, they're all supposed to be at this same level of power, all of them, right? But he clearly has the say, and he has the charisma over the other 3. So I like what they're building up with him and the power dynamic that he has. And I'm excited to see Takahiro Hira. I believe I'm saying that correctly. He does such a great job, and he's just menacing. So I'm excited to see more with him. I can't comment too much on him, but you know, I'm really we're getting some great foundation. It's building up a lot of tension, and I'm waiting just for that tension to just snap.
Yes, 100%. So moving into episode 2 now too.
Yes.
There, after the world building, a little bit more establishment of the rivalry and the tension, they kind of move into a little bit of the Portuguese side of things and how, you know, the Portuguese have established trade in Japan, and they are basically by the end of episode 2, we discover some things about the Portuguese and what their intentions really are. So another thing that's very prevalent is the Catholicism and Christian themes. Like the Portuguese are kind of like integrated into their home life, and Mariko, our female protagonist, she's always listening to this one priest, and you can see that they are very like shadowing their key people involved. So there's a little bit of manipulation in that regard. But a couple like major things that happen in this episode, Blackthorne is about to be executed, and there are a couple factors that get him out of that. But basically there's a few scenes that the Portuguese are like revealing that, you know, we got to get rid of this Englishman before he rats us out on the war that's happening between us at home, and some things that we have put together for Japan. And by the end of episode 2, I thought that was like the greatest mic drop, like for his character too. He's like, oh no, the Portuguese are not all that they say they are, because they've like legally made it a case where anything west of their colonization is going to end up under their rule.
Yeah.
And Japan is one of those countries. So you guys are screwed. Basically, if I don't help you out here, and there's one example of that, there's a secret fortress in Japan that y'all don't know about.
Yeah, Macau.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your thoughts on that? That was pretty big.
I loved it. I thought that just like it's like how you mentioned at the beginning, how very much like Game of Thrones, you have all these different factions and beliefs and just kind of like all these different gears turning. And that really establishes another gear, because you think that the Catholic Portuguese have kind of persuaded the other major other major members on the Council of Regents, but then you get this big information. They're also in the secret fortress. They are hiring Ronin to guard this, so it's like they're hiring
mercenaries.
Yeah. So they clearly don't want this. They wanted to keep it secret. Obviously, it's in the name, but basically, they're their own gear. You know what I mean? They're their own gear that's turning, the Portuguese Catholics.
Yeah.
And even though it seemed like they were intertwined with the other Japanese high powers, if this information spreads, now you have all the different powers being separated. And I think we're going to see, because of this big mic drop moment, like you said, if someone like Ishido finds out about this, or the other regents, it's just gonna cause more separation. More than just Toranaga versus the rest of them. It's gonna be like all of them versus each other.
Right.
So I'm excited to see it. Like I said, it's just it's building that tension. It's pulling that rubber band and just pulling it and pulling it and pulling it, just waiting for it to snap.
Yeah.
So I really liked that.
I really enjoy like everything, kind of what you're saying. Like they're another gear in this entire puzzle. Like they're just another piece, and to see that they had that much influence on the Japanese, like all of their key members too, and then Blackthorne also mentions that their goal is to replace you at the end of the day. Like they're going to replace this entire establishment, and like they assume that they own this land. They're just kind of manipulating you right now, and you can see that it makes sense, because you see how obvious the Christian antic is embedded now into their culture. At that point, you see that the one priest is kind of manipulating his idea of the church with the one Klansman leader. And because Toranaga was like, he's out for greed and wealth and stuff like that, and he thinks that just because the church is here, like he can profit off of it. So the Portuguese are manipulating their idea of Catholicism in the name of, they're manipulating their wealth seeking fortune in the name of Catholicism. So, which is really interesting, because I feel like that was such a big theme back then too, especially with those wars that would happen. The English and the Portuguese have hated each other for centuries, kind of because of their religious antics and their extremist antics. So to see that come over to Japan, and just the colonial aspect of it and early civilization is really cool. I really like that. He also, another key part of the ending is that this information is so large that they try to send an assassin to kill Blackthorne.
Yeah.
So that was, and also such a great sequence, by the way, too. Like the way that they formed that sequence, very brutal, very intense, very believable, and I loved what they did with that. So, but Blackthorne is not going to go away. He is like lightning in a bottle, and he's like, I'm not coming. He's like, I'm not crossing the whole world just to like die by some crappy way, So it's really cool.
I got a lot to comment on that. Just talking first about that ending scene, which was like one of the coolest cliffhangers you can leave that episode off on. Basically, oops, sorry. Both these first 2 episodes are directed by Jonathan Van Toliken, cinematography by Christopher Ross, and we watch this maid who turns out to be an assassin just swiftly go through the palace like a ninja, just stabbing people in the neck, just slashing the life out of them, hiding behind walls, and it's all done in this fluid, I believe it was a one take, just
pretty much,
steady cam following her through the palace as different people are like, holy shit, we're getting intruder.
Yeah.
And what I loved about this too, story wise, is that Toranaga swapped his quarters with John Blackthorne. So the maid is going into Blackthorne's quarters. But really, Toranaga, just for that night, slept in those quarters. So, and then we find out that, like, hey, the reason why is that they're going after John. They're not going after Toranaga. So they know that, like you mentioned, he's lightning in the bottle. He's precious. He's valuable with the information that he withholds, and how the Portuguese is quite literally lying to these Japanese powers that, hey, we're like the only country other than, you guys and Korea. So it's really interesting. I thought it was very I was like, oh, that's a big brain moment from Toranaga when he revealed I swapped my quarters with John. So
I really liked and appreciated that too, with the writing, because not only was it clever on his part, it also solidified, like, one of his men was like, oh, Ishido is gonna get like ripped for this one. And he's like, no, this wasn't about me. This was about him because of the swap. So I really like that, because he's like, no, this isn't a tribal feud. This is between the Portuguese and John. And it also proved John's point that, some of this information has to be true if they're willing to come kill him over that in the middle of the night. And then also Toranaga is super smart, because he drops that the knowledge of the fortress on the priest. He's like, oh no, I don't want your ship to leave the harbor just yet, because I wouldn't want you running around like creating more secret fortresses like you did in Macau. And he's like, he's screwed, and he knows that the information was out. So then in the subsequent scenes, he sends the assassin. But I really like, the writing is very smart in establishing the tension and just how savvy Toranaga is. Like, I already love his character, I've barely seen his screen time is probably like maybe half and half with John at this point in the first 2 episodes, but he is so savvy. And he's like a father figure to Taiko's son. He's definitely compassionate, but he's just trying to deal with all these feuds because everybody's coming at him, and he's like, look, like, I don't even want to be the Shogun. You guys should leave me alone. But he's gonna at some point have to do like the Jon Snow role and take on this role of the Shogun, or just lead these people away from the danger. So I really like the way that they've established the characters. And there's also another piece too with the fortress, which is going to be cool in the following episodes. But we get this mystery man in prison with John, and he kind of says like it's more of like about the Portuguese, but the Portuguese incited a rebellion to not only convert the Japanese to Catholics, but like they let the Ronin come in, and then they had mercenaries come in, and obviously they're trying to open up the trade and stuff. But to see like that the Portuguese would go to those lengths means that they are also going to do some more diabolical things by the end of the show too. So I really like what it's shaping up to be in that regard. But
I totally agree. Like, Toranaga is so much more of a human character. We see him be humble. We see him. There's a flashback sequence where the Taiko originally wanted him to give him sole regency of Japan. However, he was just humble enough to be like, hey, I don't want that burden. So could we do like and then the Taiko offers a council, which is is what we ended up with. But I forgot my train of thought. What was I saying? But
he's a humble human person.
Yes, yeah. And I just really enjoyed that. I was gonna say something else, but I'll move on from that. I will go into my next thought. Actually,
go ahead.
Talking about the themes of the show, which is one. I think it's not as explicit as it'll probably be developed more. But I found two specific things that's kind of stood out to me. Is one, commentary on the Japanese hierarchy and the traditional beliefs of honor in Japan, as well as just commentary on historical Catholicism. Yeah. Starting with the traditional honor system of Japan. There's been plenty of media that has kind of highlighted this. I just recently watched Harakiri, which is it's all about just criticism on that ancient, or not really that ancient, traditional Japan like honor belief that still resonates in modern day Japan. Even Godzilla -1 really covered that idea, setting their film in World War II. But we see it with Yabushige's character, where he thinks that he's going to die in those waves against those rocks. So instead of dying dishonorably, quote unquote, he just pulls out his blade and is going to, disembowel himself. Which I feel it's a little scene, but John points it out like, hey, was he really going to kill himself? And they're probably going to also, oh my god, I'm forgetting about this. One of the samurais under Toranaga's estate, he is angry and he launches up in the meeting between the regions.
Oh, you're right.
And his whole family is persecuted because of that dishonorable action that he does, and he speaks up against the regions and steps onto the map. And because of that, he is taken away, as well as their child. And we see his wife, who's just in complete disarray. Like, she's distraught, obviously, because of this. Her child was taken away from her because of this simple action that her husband committed. So I just think that little things like that really point out and criticize that traditional honor belief system, where it's like, hey, like, even just the littlest things can cause an entire family and everything they work towards just gone in a snap of a finger, and they have no say because it's just so ingrained within the traditional feudal culture here that they can't do anything. It's just a part of the rules. It's part of the rules. If you can't go out dishonorably. So, and if you do commit something dishonorably, then you're persecuted for it. I also would like to comment about just the commentary on the Catholicism of it, because like you've mentioned a lot now, that the Portuguese and the Catholics in this, they're conniving. They have all these kind of manipulation, and they know that they can rule with faith. They can use religion as a weapon. And do that through the faith of people. Which is really interesting. It's just something that's always interested me. I've always found that very fascinating, looking back at like the Spanish exposition. Spanish exposition. Exposition. When the Spanish Catholics, they persecuted many people in Europe, and just like countless other examples of Catholicism being very
Inquisition, but I just looked it up.
I apologize.
No worries.
Catholicism being very oppressive in nature, and within their own kind of selfish intentions. So I think there's some valid commentary there within the story. So yeah, that was my thought.
Yeah, I just it plays to how the rest of the power play is gonna unfold with every group of people at this point. It's really like everybody thinks that they're doing something good or honorable. I mean, really, the most honorable person so far is Toranaga. He has the best intentions, but I think everyone else is kind of like just trying to get further and further ahead. The Portuguese are using their religious aspects to get ahead and manipulate people. Ishido is trying to manipulate a lot of the people around him. It's all very like power play, clan driven. So I really like that it's that, and I also like, FX could have done a very cheap samurai show, but I like that they adapted a strong novel. They also got a lot of Japanese actors to do this. They could have done a 47 Ronin thing with Keanu Reeves. They could have done some crap, they could have done what they did with Matt Damon and did like the Great Wall of China movie where he's fighting monsters. And what are we doing? Like that was ridiculous. So for them to take the care and properly representing the show as well, and to do like, I would say probably like 60% of the show is in Japanese, maybe a little more, but I appreciated that too. You and I are not people to mind subtitles either, and it's some people might not get onto the show if they're that I don't know, if they're that particular about watching only English, like they're missing out, because this show is full of great material. It's really if they like Game of Thrones, they can do this show too. That's 100% what I would recommend. But any other closing thoughts about the 2 episodes before we wrap up?
Just commenting on that, like they brought in not only a native Japanese cast here, but also Hiroyuki Sanada produces the show as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, he's a producer on the show. So they're the people here are familiar with the culture, and also you can tell that people are passionate about this story. I also just kind of wanted to comment as a cinematography brain, wanted to comment on Christopher Ross's work in these first 2 episodes. I love how a lot of these shots are shot in these really like epic, very distorted anamorphic lenses. There's like a handful of shots on John specifically, when they first kind of come ashore on Japan, and they're like super distorted anamorphic lenses on John and the others. I just really appreciate that. I think it looks really beautiful. It's something I really like. I just think that overall the cinematography is beautiful in the show. You can tell that they're putting a lot of work, a lot of production value into it. I know I mentioned the costuming and just production design as well. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
You can really see it in that ending of episode 2 with the one take. Or I could be wrong. I believe it's a one take. It seemed like a one take. It was just very
very fluid.
Yeah. And you could tell, it's consistent throughout, and you don't lose any visual clarity. Yeah. So God bless the crew that's been working on this, because they're doing some good stuff here. They're doing some good stuff. There was one other thing that I wanted to say. Honestly, I'm gonna keep it at that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more to come too, but I agree with what you're saying in terms of the cinematography, the approach creatively too. They really do a great job at depicting this era, which, like I was saying, we haven't really seen this era represented a whole lot. We've seen very generic takes on samurai films. I feel like there's been a lot of there's great Kurosawa movies, and then there's very cheap samurai movies. I feel like there's been very like little in between. So it's good to see that there's a narrative show about this era, and then even about other parts of the world that they can bring the source material in. And you know, this show, it doesn't even have to have that level of quality of the Kurosawa movies to achieve what it's doing right now. You know, I think it's totally its own thing too, which is fine. You know, like I think that he's a staple for Japanese films and culture in that regard. But I think that what they're doing with this is representing that time period just as well, and in a different fashion where it brings in a modern feel. The camera work is spectacular. The design is spectacular. And like I said, too, for an FX show, I mean, it doesn't get better than this. You know, I can't imagine making a better looking show for FX than what they're doing right now. So really big shout out to the crew on that. But that's all for me. I
actually wanted to say one more thing.
Go for it, dude.
Anna Sawai is really good in this show.
Yeah, she's
incredible. And her character of Mariko is just going to get even more screen time. And I'm so excited to see her whole dynamic as the interpreter for John Blackthorne evolve over the show. There's an incredible moment in episode 1 where after the wife of that one samurai who committed the dishonorable act and spoke against Ishido, and then her child was taken away. Anna Sawai's character Mariko comforts her, and I can't restate exactly what she said, but she comforts her and kind of puts on this face of like, no, this is you know, acting for what is considered appropriate for the time.
Yeah.
And then she walks away, leaves, and the second she's alone, she enters just this room. She breaks down crying.
Yeah.
And she holds her cross, and going more into like the Christian element too. Like her own faith is being questioned with the arrival of John Blackthorne.
Yeah.
And also just her being is also very much questioned through the culture here. You know, it's breaking her. You know, she has to put on this face, but the second she's alone, she breaks down crying.
Yeah.
I just thought it was very beautiful. I think that I'm very excited to see how she does in her performance and how she takes this character. So that was the last note for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good note. I think she's going to be a very essential character to this story. And then another thing is there's now that romantic tension between her and Toranaga a little bit, and then her husband was kind of like questioning like why she's in the room for these things instead of him as the interpreter. So I like how that's gonna play out, I think. And that could also add another element of, you know, Toranaga's going to have extra people look over his shoulder more.
Yeah.
But Mariko is very strong. And I like how she's a very stoic, steady presence of confidence. But she does have a human side to her. But she has to be this steadfast rock of assurance to Toranaga too. And I really like how that's easily conveyed in the first 2 episodes. But yeah.
All right. Do you think this is a good place to wrap it up here?
Yeah. I got everything out. You know, we'll be back for episodes 3 and 4, our next coverage of the show. But
I'm excited. I'm excited. All right. Well, Cinema Wave viewers, I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. You know, if you have watched the first 2 episodes of Shogun and witnessed Toranaga's tension and conflict against the 3 Gs, God, glory, and gold, may it be the other council, other regents on the council, or the Catholic or the Portuguese Catholics, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you don't already follow us on @CinemaWave Media on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Threads, as well as @_CultureWave Media, where you can find us on Instagram, I recommend you do so. We got a lot of cool content, and it keeps you in the loop. It has been I, Vinny Albano, and
I'm Zach Miller. Dude, that was sweet. That was sick. That was sick. God's glory gold. I was like, oh, I got some goosebumps there. That was nice. That was nice. Wow.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. All right. So up until next time, so long.